Hey guys, Jarretman here, back with some more 500 Zoom, just picking up where we left off in the last video. We'll make the very, actually no, we won't, not versus the under the gun limp there. I think that player has a limp re-raising range as well. Eight-six off versus the 50 BB stack. I think we're still gonna call, especially because it's an unknown player. This is already like a very marginal call, however. And having no equity, no blockers to the continue range, no anything, I don't think we want to use this as a bet. It's a texture where at equilibrium the big blind should be not betting very often, but when they do bet, they should be utilizing a larger size. So like betting 1/3 with your range here would be a very bad simplification, in my opinion. At least in terms of what it should be, you know, versus real people who just check fold all day, then go ahead. King Jack off, 250 big blinds effective here, is a much less good 3-betting candidate. These types of like offsuit Broadway hands are the ones that kind of get shifted out of the 3-betting range, and the suited lower connecty type hands get shifted into the 3-betting range more, at least from the sims that I've seen. It makes intuitive sense as well if you have played deep stack poker and you have played a lot of 3-bet pots at a position. It's very difficult to navigate these offsuit Broadway hands, as they rarely make a nutted hand. Jack's 3 suited, we can mix in some 3-bets, but we get a call. And King 5 suited, we'll mix in some checks, but mostly betting this on the flop. We get a very low number, so we will go for the check, however. And versus the 3/4 pot bet, we'll make the fold actually. Yeah, and we get a low number. I was gonna say maybe we should be check raising it some of the time, but I think we have enough candidates that aren't just king high. It's kind of close though, maybe blind versus blind. Maybe I'm over folding that spot if I fold this one. Like king 9 of clubs I would consider calling or check raising more often. Okay, I was gonna say this is a hand that obviously we're going to continue, and we could even continue it as a flop 3-bet, but I think just in general we want to force our opponent to play turns and rivers that are rather uncomfortable, given how dynamic the flop is and how much SPR remains. There's less value in just 3-betting the flop or GMing the flop, and when we get called, we're flipping, we're never crushing, and if he has a good draw, he likely still has 2 overs with the draw, so we're still flipping. I'm gonna check back the turn on table 1. So yeah, I want to maintain my positional advantage here on table 1 and not give him the opportunity to 4-bet jam the flop. At least not too often, and not with these types of hands. Easy overcall with the pocket 2s on table 2, especially given 2 weaker players. And we have a very easy raise. I'm rolling for sizing, and I get a jam, which is fine with the jack high flushes. It'd be a little too thin with some of the lower flushes, I believe. And our bluffs for this spot are going to be hands like either potentially a hand like 6-5 offsuit with the 5 of hearts, or a hand like Queen Jack offsuit with the Queen or Jack of hearts that has to call the flop versus the check raise just having 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw. But then on the turn, it doesn't interact with the board well enough to bet all the time. And now on the river has a nice bluffing opportunity. And then obviously as well, we're going to have the Ace of Hearts blocker bluffs. But in these spots, Ace 4 off versus 2.2 we'll call versus cutoff. In these spots here where basically a flush is never folding, right? Like if he has a flush, he's always calling. It doesn't matter how big the flush is. He's just always calling. So in that case, it doesn't matter if we, the Ace of Hearts blocker is only better in the sense if it blocks more combos of flushes, not that it blocks the ace high flush, because any flush is calling. So you want to, as long as a card blocks more flushes, like more combos of flushes, then it would become a better bluff than if it blocked higher flushes. Very complicated way of saying he's never folding any flushes, so we can bluff with any heart. Not just like the Ace of Hearts. We can choose from them all at some frequency at least. Now, that's all in theory land, and Salo Costa's a good reg, so I'm okay playing theory land versus him. But versus real people, I don't like this spot as an overbet spot, to be honest, from Demon Doink. And we get a low number, we'll make the fold. I have more 2x than he does. I mean, I guess if he assumes I always lead my 2x when I have a 2x on the turn, then he can go ahead and start overbetting there. But I don't think it's a spot where you want to lead your range for like a small size on the turn. So yeah, I will have 2x, and it's just very easy to continue versus that bet. But it will get the overbet will get chosen sometimes at equilibrium there. The solver will overbet this turn, definitely. What was I saying? I cut myself off. Oh yeah, back to this flush hand. I can't find the hand, but what I was saying is that ace queen off will be a fold here in these positions. It's close. Like you could actually, I think that was a mistake. I thought he opened hijack there. Yeah, that one was a mistake actually. I should have 4-bet that at least some of the time. We have a pure continue on table 2, but I don't like it. I just feel like these spots get bet big when they have a good hand sometimes, but just because I don't like it doesn't mean that I'm not going to try to play good poker. And I'm pretty sure ace queen off doesn't fold even versus the big bet there. Maybe we would, I guess we would rather have a hand like ace 10 suited with a backdoor flush draw. We'll make the loose overlimp here, given that the big blind is also a weaker player. Yeah, that ace queen off cold 4-bet spot was a mistake. I didn't see that it was cutoff button. I thought it was hijack cutoff. I need to pay more attention. I only have 2 tables going. I have no excuses. But it's a low EV spot anyways, that ace queen off. It's not like I lost that much EV by folding there. What was I saying? Yeah, that hand with the flush. That's what I was talking about. So the hand with the flush, I was saying versus real people who might fold a flush, then it becomes like they might fold a low flush versus that size. It might become better or it would become better to bluff when you have the higher flush blocker than when you have the lower flush blocker. And I don't like 4-betting as much here on table 2 after the cold caller. I feel like the cold caller usually has like a very mid-pair heavy range, which makes 7s overcalling not as fun, but is what it is. We're getting such a good price, and 7s would never be a fold cutoff versus button, so... We're in a weird spot now on table 2. I think these hand classes are the types of hands that we want to bluff. Given the very small 3-bet, we're going to call the king 3 suited here on table 1. The -1 big blind there actually makes a big difference in which hands you can profitably continue. It goes both ways as well. And we get a 67. Again, I'm considering bluffing this combo. I like, what did he cold call with here? 10-9 suited, okay. I like just calling here on table 1 with this combo. Okay. I got my low number. It is close to bottom of range, and I think we should be bluffing this some of the time. But if we start bluffing it all of the time, I think we're going to be over bluffing. Not to mention, I guess we do have like a very small amount of showdown value, but that showdown value is minimal. The reason the showdown value is minimal is that if he has a worse hand, he's probably never checking it back. And since we're check folding all the time, it's like we might as well use this candidate to bluff sometimes. But I got my low number, so I don't think it's a good spot to over bluff either. Jack 10 suited under the gun versus small blind. We're not loving it, but I'm not gonna fold here. Yeah, this might even mix in some folds. I can't actually remember exactly. Nothing to do but call on table 2. Table 1 is another good candidate to bet 1/3 with your range. I don't think that you lose that much EV by doing that. And table 2, again, nothing to do but call. Not a great spot. I think this line ends up a lot of like he jams the river. I fold mostly. But we can't fold yet. At least I don't think we can fold yet. That's a nice river. Yeah, and if he checks now, we're just basically always ahead. I don't think we get called very often. But I also don't think like a very small bet makes much sense here. Like, I don't think a bet that like of $26 makes much sense. Or 26 big blinds, I mean. He's going to be over folding even at equilibrium, like theory-wise, after he goes bet and then checks the river and we jam. Like, he'll be folding maybe 70% of the time, even though the price dictates he should be calling more often, because I'm betting exactly pot. We'll check back the 10-8 of clubs here versus the small blind range. I think we get the opportunity to win the pot on the turn very often as well. If he does have a hand that was going to fold the flop like that. And getting check jammed would be a disaster there. So table 2 versus the pot size open from the button. We want to be 3-betting in general slightly more than we would be for our calling range, but we get a call here. I was going to say, like, maybe normally I would be 3-betting this like 25% of the time, but maybe versus the pot size open, we can 3-bet it slightly more. We'll be calling less and 3-betting more. Like, it's not like we'll be 3-betting an insane amount more. It's not like we're going to change our range that much. But the ratio of our calls to 3-bets will slightly shift towards more 3-bets and less calls because we're getting a worse price in our call. Are we near the bottom of our range on table 2? That's the question. I think the answer is no. He bet really small on the flop, so I will be floating with even hands like Jack 10 offsuit with the 10 of diamonds. We'll be floating the flop, and that makes a nice bluff on the river here. And this hand can just check it down. I don't expect to be good very often, but he could potentially check down a hand like Queen Jack, or potentially check down a hand like a 7 that we chop with, or like pocket 6s through pocket 2s. Could also check back. 6-8 suited, you can open it from the cutoff. You can fold it from the cutoff. It's like near the bottom. On a table with 3 good regulars remaining, I prefer just to fold it, to be honest. I think this exact board under the gun versus button, you do fine just by checking your range. And with our hand, we won't be folding even versus that size, not with the king of diamonds, I believe. And we roll our low numbers, so we will just be calling. We would do a small amount of check raising, I think. The problem, of course, again, with this logic, and again, I say this, yet I still play. I play like I didn't say this. We have an easy fold now, I think, versus that size. Yeah. The problem with that thinking is that people usually, when they just have like an airy hand, maybe you can assume that they would just bet 1/3, and then when they have a good hand, maybe you can assume they're more likely to bet bigger. But those are dangerous assumptions to make. It's better to just play solid. Do we need to float the ace-4 suited here versus under the gun? Okay, I was gonna say I'll raise or fold it. I think this is like an extremely low frequency raise and mostly just a fold. Considering the positions. We can check the turn some of the time. Being a bit deeper, I like going for the bit of a larger overbet, actually. Like, normally I would just go for like a 110% overbet here, or even like a pot bet makes sense, but being a bit deeper, I kind of prefer the 1.5x pot overbet. And like I said, I don't think we want to be overbetting all the time with our exact hand. It's a hand that shouldn't really be check raising the flop that often anyways, if at all, to be honest. And now on the river, I don't think there's any point to betting 1/3. tough for him to come up with bluffs here, because I don't think he turns a hand like queens or kings with a king or queen of clubs into a bluff, and I don't think he floats the turn with many offsuited club combos. Like, for example, if he had king queen offsuit with the king of clubs, is he floating the turn versus the 1.5x overbet? I don't think so. So what is he turning into a bluff here? Like king jack off, 9x of spades, queen 10 of spades, king queen of spades, something like that. Yeah, he could do that. Gonna make the fold though. I think it's gonna be tough for him to find enough bluffs here, especially because all of those bluff candidates that I just mentioned, like king queen of spades, queen 10 of spades, 10-8. Oh, he wouldn't have 10-8 of spades, but you know, the spade combos, they're on the river and they're thinking like, oh, this is a bad combo to bluff because I block his folding range, which is true. So, yeah, interesting spot. I think I went a little bit spewy on the flop, given those positions. And then on the turn, it's fine. We're betting extremely polar. We're basically saying we have a 3 that check raised the flop, pocket 3s, jacks or 9s, because we can no longer bet jack 9 for that size for value. We might bet jack 9 for that size in order to like shove rivers on a card like an ace, which is a thing. The solver will do that sometimes. But overall, we're just betting extremely polar, and I don't think we should be betting the turn always with this hand. So yeah, I might have played that one a little bit spewy, but I like check folding the river there. That one's a bit of a tight fold as well, but being out of position with another player left to act, I don't think we realize a lot of our equity if we continue as a call there, and check raising is kind of a little bit thin. If we were on the button here, table 2, I think I would mostly consider overlimping this hand. Again, fearing the check jam and having a weaker player in the big blind, it's okay to play a pot. Table 1, it's still a high frequency checking spot overall, but it is a board where you could mix in some bets. It makes sense to have some bets. And table 2, I think I like checking back my ace high here. If I'm going to bet, it's going to be for a small size. But yeah, I kind of like prefer, because I bet 1/3 on the flop. You can have a lot of hands that are drawing dead on the turn. We have an easy call on table 1 versus that size. Maybe I should have rolled for like a small amount of check raises, but I think this hand class mostly wants to call. Okay, we have an easy bet now on table 2, but I'm going to bet for not that big of a size, as we're targeting just like king highs a lot, I guess. Or a hand like 8s that decided to limp call pre, or like a 7 that didn't raise the flop. Or 9s, okay. Too thin to bet 1/3, I think, on table 1. It's close though. Maybe we could. Any jack is good enough to bet 1/3, I think. Yeah, this is an interesting spot here. I don't know if our hand is the hand that we want to hero. Okay, I'll roll 25% calls. Gotta fold. I think we do need to, the ace queen off, we will squeeze half the time here. Okay. I think we do need to make some uncomfortable calls on the river even versus that overbet, just because we are so capped, and even on the river after this action. So first of all, we cap ourselves when check calling the flop a lot versus that very small size. And then on the river, when we don't lead, we basically don't even have much top pairs. Like, we're going to check, quote unquote, trap sometimes, like with a hand like a queen or a jack, but overall, we're going to be mostly leading those. And yeah, we have an easy call when we do check those types of hands, but we have to call some other hands. I think tens is okay, as a lot of his like 10 of diamonds or 10 of spades combos would often bet the turn, so they won't be available to be used as bluffs by the river. And so that's why I was rolling like 25% of calls there. We don't have to call that much given the price. He bet 2x the pot, so we don't have to defend much of our range there. Good candidate on table 1 to just bet frequently, I think. Anyways, you'll see a lot of checkbacks actually though if you put that one into some sort of solver. The 6-7 suited, these are the hands that you might instinctively want to 3-bet them small blind versus button, but they just don't play very well at these shallow stacks, like at 100 big blind depths. The value you gain from having coverage on those low or middle textures does not balance out with the value you lose from just having 7 high in your 3-betting range. When you're on the big blind and you're 3-betting a very polar range, it's different. Depends how you're playing your ranges on table 1. Tens could even potentially mix in some folds here. But you could also potentially mix in some 4-bets. Like, it's, again, it depends how you're playing your ranges, and it also depends how you are, what ranges you're opening. Because if you're opening all the pairs at like some low frequency, then tens, you know, it's not as, given these positions, it's not as strong. But yeah, I think calling it is very reasonable. And we will continue a small amount of the time here versus the bet. Okay, we get a call. Mostly folding though on the flop. So our bluffs on table 1 are going to be low pairs. So like, again, this depends how you're constructing your under the gun range, but yeah, tens might be a bluff here. If you can, if you're constructing your range in a way where you don't have these low pairs, like you're opening, let's say 6s plus or 7s plus, then you never have these low pairs to consider bluffing. So tens would maybe make it into that range, but you'd rather bluff 7s and you'd rather bluff 8s and you'd rather bluff 9s, because 10s beats those hands that he might check back. And now on the river, okay, we get our high number. Okay, I would rather check raise when we block the suited jacks though. I'm going to make the fold. So even though some people, like some ranges you'll see cutoff versus hijack, you're not even supposed to 3-bet jack 10 suited. Some ranges, like, but you know, most people are still 3-betting it. So I would rather have the 10 of spades or the 10 of diamonds in my hand if I'm going to check raise this river, as Jack 10 suited is a very real hand that he can have. But otherwise, we don't block any of his value with these pocket 10s. And those blockers become more important when you're doing big river check raises compared to when you're just deciding like which hands to bluff from the bottom of your range. It's less impactful in that spot than it would be in this check raise spot, I believe. And we have 2 calls here versus the small size. We can't fold queen jack off, and we'll raise like a very small percentage of the time on table 1. Maybe we even have to float this like some of the time, but I'm not going to. On table 2. Again, raising a very small percentage of the time on table 1. Otherwise, I think we just have to continue. Our ace high, small blind versus big blind, even has some showdown value. Now, are we going to put what I just said to the test, or am I going to bluff this one, considering how much queen X we have compared to how little queen X he has? Okay, considering how polar he should be betting the turn, I am going to check this one back. Okay, I think we would have got called there for sure, but I mean, that's not the way we should be approaching the spot. I'm just saying, yeah. Maybe we should be bluffing this one always. Like he just very rarely has a queen. If he has a queen, it was 2 pair. Table 2 is another one of those this is another very aggressive spot. Small blind versus big blind. A lot of betting, a lot of raising, a lot of 3-betting. A lot of doing all of that with hands you're maybe not normally used to doing it with, like just pure overcards or pure backdoor flush draw hands, backdoor straight draw hands, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw hands. You will be betting, raising, and calling with hands that are not a 10 and not a 2 way more often than you'll be calling with hands that are a 10 or a 2. Your range composition is just going to be mostly not connecting with the board, is what I'm trying to say. 160 big blinds deep versus a rec player. You might consider calling the 4-3 off, but not with this rake. I feel like some people, when they're playing against weaker players, recreationals in general, they get kind of like this ego complex thing where they're like, oh, I can play basically any hand I want against them because I'm better than them and I'll outplay them. But they forget that maybe a lot of your EV is having a better preflop strategy than your opponent. And if you're playing a minus EV preflop strategy in order to chase plus EV postflop spots, maybe you're losing more in preflop than you are gaining in postflop. So just got to be careful with that kind of stuff. I wouldn't mind checking back on table 1. We have an easy decision now, just a very easy call. Raising would be too thin. He donked 3 ways. He called the small blind after a limp and an ISO, so he can't be completely wide. Ace 4 suited, we will 3-bet some of the time here. I think I mentioned this in that micro stakes video I did. When you're playing against weaker players, don't level yourself too much. I have top pair. He's betting half pot. I call. That's my logic here. high frequency big betting spot on table 2. But I like our hand. We don't want to be just betting range. And I like our hand to check call. And call me a nit, but I'm just going to call this river. Yeah. I just think his range is mostly a total bluff hand or a better queen. I don't think he ever shows up with a worse hand for value like that. Maybe he can show up with like a weird mergy hand, but never like a true value hand. Okay, we'll make the call here on table 1. This hand doesn't play very well multi-way, but we're against two potentially weaker players, so. And we'll make the fold with the ace-4 versus the 75% size. And I guess we'll make the fold here on table 1. You know, when I'm playing against the fun players, I usually just try to play straightforward. Straightforward, don't level myself. Sometimes they have you, and that's just poker. Table 2 versus the large size versus hijack. I think we can fold the king 10 off. And I like betting 1/3 on table 1. I think that's our preferred size with all of our hands that want to bet. And the king jack makes a decent bluff some of the time there. Just gonna see how long we've been recording for. Okay, we'll go for a little bit longer. Jack 7 suited is close to the top of the folding range, but it's still a pure fold. 5-4 suited gonna be a very low frequency open for me under the gun. Like a 15%, 20% open, something like that. Queen 6 off. You could 3-bet it, you could call it. You can fold it. It's the absolute bottom. If we were facing just the hijack 3-bet, because we were opening so infrequently with 5-4 suited, like, you know, 20%, 15%, something like that, when we do get 3-bet, we will continue. But versus the hijack call and the cutoff squeeze, because we're in the squeeze spot, I think this is a good hand to just fold pure. And I think if we wanted to play our range as a 4-better fold, that would be the most logical. I like a half pot sizing for this texture with all of our hands that want to bet. I would play this board as a half pot or check, I think. I think it's the toughest to play against, but this is a board where you could just bet 1/3 with your range. Absolutely. I don't think you would lose that much EV. The best, like, optimal way to play this board would be a mixed strategy, like having a small bet and a big bet and a check. High frequency checking spot on table 1, and we'll have to make sure to check with even some of these stronger aces. One of the reasons we want to check it's a high frequency check spot is we have a lot of hands that we need to protect our range with. Like let's say we have kings, queens, jacks, nines, something like that. We can't just barrel the turn, and we need to protect it by including some ace-x in our check calling range. And we need to also include some stronger ace-x in there, otherwise he can just relentlessly bet like ace-jack, for example. And yeah, we're close here on table 1. The problem here is that he shouldn't be, he's basically repping a 10 because a lot of the flushes should be checking back the turn. And I think we're pretty high up in our range. I'm gonna make the fold though. We got our low number, we got our 17. We have ace-x combos that have a club, which are strictly better calls than the ace-x that do not have a club. So combine that with having my low number, not having a club blocker. Yeah, I think we can fold that one there. It's not like he's ever betting worse for value. Could potentially start bluffing with our 4s here on table 1. I think I just prefer checking it down here. If I bet, I guess we could try to get him to fold a hand like 8s, but he's never folding a hand like a jack, an ace, or a king, so I don't think it's that efficient to start bluffing with the 4s here. Even though we almost always lose, that's fine. The king queen off versus the cold 4-bet is just going to be a fold, even in these positions. Nice flop for our hand on table 1. Not the greatest board for our range, but it's not bad either. Very high frequency check raise with this exact combo just because we're pushing so much equity. In fact, versus a weaker player who I'm not considering balance against, I prefer just pure check raising this combo. We just have so much equity versus any hand. We're never in bad shape unless he has exactly queen jack. And even if he has exactly queen jack, it's not like we're drawing dead. We still have all of our flush outs. Alright guys, I'm going to play till my big blind. And that's going to be it for this video and for this series of videos. The next video you watch will likely be another microstakes video, probably of me playing whatever version of microstakes has the antes in it. PokerStars seems to be changing that up. So yeah, let's get these last hands in here. I think ace-8 off maybe even wants to jam versus this 3-bet some of the times, given the very shallow stack sizes. I think that's a thing when we're playing this shallow, but you'd have to assume that he has a 3-bet folding range with that stack size, which I think is a pretty bad assumption. Alright, that's it for this video, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.